The iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max are by default some of the best smartphones ever made. After all, they're Apple's new flagships, and so there's an expected level of quality and performance you can expect given the brand alone, not to mention the price tag of $1,000 plus. While there is no doubt that if you have the money and prefer to use iPhone, the 14 Pro is a great buy, questions do arise for those on the fence between shelling out the extra hundreds of dollars over an option like the similar iPhone 14 and 14 Plus. These might be amazing phones, but are they amazing value? Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and as someone who's been using the iPhone 14 Pro for practically about a month now, and whose mother has also been using the Max, no, these phones are not amazing value, but I don't think that any premium flagship these days really is amazing value. That being said, I do think they are worth buying for the right person, that person being someone with the kind of money to spend on a phone like this. Now we're going to do a few things in this video, timestamps as always in the description. We're mainly going to focus on the value factor, at least on the iPhone side. I'm assuming if you're watching this and you're interested in buying this phone, you know you want an iPhone, so the question for you is probably, do you buy the iPhone 14 Pro, or maybe something like the iPhone 14 or 14 Plus? Now, to be clear here, like I said in my recent iPhone buying guide, the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max are absolutely worth it over the iPhone 14, and we'll be spending some time just kind of explaining why. There's two main factors: the camera setup and the display. There's a $200 difference between the phones, which can be a lot of money, especially in different countries. It doesn't always scale very well, but assuming the relative value difference stays the same, for the first time since Apple's been making these Pro phones with the XS and XR, I don't recommend the lower tier option. I recommend going up to the Pros. They're just better value. What you get for an extra $200 is significant. We're going to explain why exactly that is, but there's your answer right out of the gate. This is a phone that is worth it. Whether or not it's good value is really up to you and whether or not you're willing to spend $1,000+ on a phone. Most people probably not so much, and that's totally fine. But I want to talk about again the value here, and then we'll kind of go into my own experience a little bit and just my overall thoughts, especially moving from the iPhone 13 Pro, which is fundamentally a very similar experience. And spoiler alert, while I do really like this phone, it's definitely not worth getting if you have a 13 Pro. Anything lower than that though is maybe worth considering if you are willing to spend that money. And that's what it comes down to. How much money are you willing to spend? And if you're not willing to spend the $1,000 for the 14 Pro, I recommend looking for a 13 Pro if you can find one, or go down to the iPhone 13. The 14 and 14 Plus are just not really worth it right now. So there's your answer. Let's go into more detail. Without further ado, roll the intro. Alright, starting this off here, if we're talking about value, we can't not talk about cameras. The camera setup on the rear is what you're really paying for when you go for a 14 Pro or any Pro iPhone. No other phone that they sell brand new right now has 3 lenses on the back. This is what Apple considers a Pro feature, and this year they're more robust than ever with an amazing 4 different optical zoom ranges. You might be used to having a 0.5 times zoom, a 1 time zoom, a 2 time zoom, and last year with the 13 Pro we had that 3 time zoom, and this year we get all of them at once, even with only 3 lenses. This is because the main lens is now 48 megapixels, and so it can crop into 12 megapixels at that 2 time zoom. The versatility this offers in any and every situation is unparalleled, and it allows for fast, easy shots no matter where and when you are. I don't really care personally about the minute details of photography, things like the DxO mark score and stuff like that. It just doesn't matter to me. And don't get me wrong, it's still interesting, and there's plenty of reviews that'll spend 20 minutes or more going in depth into every last pixel compared to the competition, but what's important to me is that this phone is consistently great. I don't want to spend 5 minutes preparing for the absolute perfect shot. I want to pull out my phone, snap a photo, and know that it's going to be very good. Or take some video. iPhone has been the best with video forever now, even messing around with the cinematic video feature. Cinematic video isn't perfect, but it can result in some just beautiful clips. This one just following my dog around, so cool. You also have action mode where it stabilizes the camera. This is a new feature, and it's not perfect yet. In this specific shot here, I was holding the leash in the same hands that I was filming with, and my dog was pulling, and I was definitely shaky, but it really doesn't look like it. It's very impressive. This is 1 time zoom. I don't recommend using the 0.5. It defaults to that for some reason, but the quality is not nearly as good because that sensor isn't as good, but it's awesome to have. And if you want to go further, you can record in an extremely high quality ProRes video. Now that does take up a ton of space to the point you can actually only film in 4K ProRes if you have at least the 256 gig model. The 128 won't do it just because it does cameras fill up so fast. So that's something to keep in mind if you're more of a, I guess, a pro user. But for most people, regular video is fantastic. Combine that with the great regular photos, portrait photos, night photos, whatever, and you end up with what is easily the best all-round package. And that's where I think iPhone really shines in photography. Its versatility, but also its consistency and reliability. While there are more pro-oriented tools, with even raw photos using the entire 48 megapixels and making some really cool results, this is ultimately the ideal camera for the everyman to just take pictures or video and never have to worry about it. The camera is awesome, and it's probably the reason you spend $1,000 on a slab of glass that fits in your pocket. The 14 and 14 Plus only have 2 lenses. You get 0.5 times zoom and 1 time zoom, and that's it. You're giving quite a lot up there, and you're only saving $200. And the camera is really only one half of what the 14 Pro offers over the 14 and 14 Plus. The other half is really the display. Now, of course, there is more. The chipset is the A16 rather than the old A15 that was in the 13 Pro. That's what the 14 and 14 Plus are using. That being said, all these processors for years now have been so darn fast, it doesn't really matter, and so I'm not too concerned about that. For me, it's the cameras and then the display. And when I say display, I don't mean the dynamic island, I mean ProMotion. Now, if you don't know what ProMotion is, you probably don't have to worry about it, but I bet you would still like it. Basically, the 14 Pro, like the 13 Pro, has its display run at 120 Hz, which gives 120 frames per second. This can be slowed down to as low as 1 Hz, which is how it does its new always-on display. A normal screen, like on the 14 and 14 Plus, has 60 Hz, and the difference is when you're looking at the two and just swiping around, it's a lot smoother with more frames per second. You can go to a store and kind of compare the two phones if you'd like, and you'll get the idea pretty quick. While it's a better experience, it doesn't actually affect the user experience that much. Unless you're really into gaming, then more frames is a good thing, but other than that, there's not a whole lot of use cases for the better display other than it just looks better. But it's still a premium option that you're paying a lot of money for, and I really think Apple missed the boat not putting at least 90 Hz in the 14 and 14 Plus, because ultimately these are phones that are only $200 less than the Pro. And there is the dynamic island. It's very neat. I like the little animations that play when you exit out of some music or whatever. You can see it playing on the top bar, you can tap it to access your controls, that sort of thing. It's very handy, but it's not a game changer. It's just a nice feature for those who do shell out the extra money for the Pro. And if you're not really willing to do that, what you should do is save some cash and get the iPhone 13. So that's the value here, $1,000, $1,200. It's so much money, but most people probably won't pay that, at least up front. I did, and my credit card was screaming at me for it. But while it's hard to call any flagship phone these days amazing value, this phone, as far as $1,000 phones go, is definitely one of the best ones out there. And if you're into iPhone, I'd say it's definitely worth picking up. So that's that portion of the video out of the way. My own experience with the phone, especially coming from the 13 Pro. Well, honestly, the phone feels pretty much identical to my 13 Pro, to the point that the first week I had the phone before I reset my old phone, I kept picking up the 13 Pro and starting to use it before, after a few minutes, realizing that I had in fact picked up my old phone. Now, well, yes, I was still used to that phone, so it makes sense. That definitely wouldn't have happened when I say I got my iPhone 10 back in the day. Now, not every year can be an iPhone 10 type upgrade, but you get the idea. There's just not a lot of differences between these two phones, and that's okay because I loved my 13 Pro. So my own experience with the phone, especially coming from the 13 Pro. First, two very minor nitpicks. The first one is the dynamic island actually is a little bit more intrusive than the old notch. Now, yes, it's smaller, it's floating, it's a bit sleeker, but it actually is a bit lower on the screen vertically. You can especially see this watching video that's done at a 2:1 aspect ratio, such as my own videos. It cuts in a little bit, whereas on the 13 Pro, it would just be a black bar because the notch was completely at the top. It's a minor thing, but it is a weird choice on Apple's part that they didn't just raise the pill or the island or whatever you want to call it. They didn't just make it a little higher. I guess it must have been an aesthetic choice. They didn't like how it looked that way, but it is just so slightly annoying. I do kind of wish they figured out a better system. And then the other thing is on the back of the phone, these camera bumps are getting so darn big. They were big last year, the year before. I mean, I remember talking about the 11 Pro being huge, and that's fine, but the problem is that the camera wobble this year is really bad. It actually annoyed me quite a bit my first week using the phone. Just trying to lie it flat on a desk and trying to use it, it does wobble around. It protrudes significantly more than it did on my 13 Pro, or at least it feels like it does. So that's worth mentioning. Again, it's a very minor issue, and I got used to it extremely quickly, but it's one of the few setbacks of these cameras getting better and better every year. And this is not at all a complaint, it's just a weird design choice. But if you look at these two phones, besides the camera being bigger on the 14 Pro, the Apple logo itself is also slightly larger larger. I don't know why exactly Apple chose to do this. My guess is it looks maybe a little more balanced that way with the bigger camera lenses, but I thought that was kind of a funny difference. And with those as two, again, very minor things out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what I liked. The biggest thing I've been enjoying is 2x zoom. The 48 megapixel raw photos have been pretty cool. I didn't show this before, but this here is the best night photo I have ever taken. This is the 48 megapixels in raw. This was on a ferry coming back from Vancouver Island, and while not every shot I've taken has been this good in dark conditions, it's been pretty great. The camera to me is the best thing about this phone. And my mother too, she got the Pro Max, I got the smaller Pro. She got it because she wanted the amazing camera, and coming from the A+, well, she certainly hasn't been disappointed thus far. Oh, here's one weird thing, I guess regarding the camera, but there's this photo I took that completely bugged out. I have never seen anything like this from an iPhone before, and this is just how the photo is. The live photo part is absolutely fine. It's like this from my iCloud and my photo app everywhere. It's the weirdest thing I've seen in a while. And besides that, I suppose the always on display is a thing. Honestly, I don't find myself actually looking at it very often. I'd almost be tempted to turn it off if it wasn't for the fact that it's one of the few new features from my old phone. Battery life has been about the same as my 13 Pro. I haven't noticed really any difference. Perhaps it would be a bit better if I didn't use the always on display. In fact, it almost most definitely would be. But mind you, my 13 Pro was fantastic with battery, and so is this phone, so no complaints whatsoever there. I might not use my phone as much as some people, but I could probably get 2 days use without any issue at all. You've got the A16 in here. It's super duper fast. Again, no real difference from my last phone, but everything's smooth. The games run fast. Honestly, the dynamic island for me, I kind of forgot about it pretty quickly. It is cool, and it's fun to mess around with. It's fun to show off, and it looks good. I mean, I like taking video of it. It's a nice design. I like how it looks. I like how Apple is not afraid to show it off, whereas other manufacturers with whole bunch notches and whatnot, they tend to try to hide it, if anything. I like that Apple embraces it, you know? It kind of adds some unique character, and it is a genuinely useful feature, although I haven't found myself using it a ton, mainly because I don't listen to a ton of music off my iPhone, so that's probably the biggest thing. And if I do, generally the phone is locked, so I'm not, you know, touching the top bar because it's already on the lock screen. So what I'm trying to say here, decent upgrade from any phone besides the 13 Pro. It really comes down to you, what you're currently using, and if you want something like this. And I do really like the phone. I highly recommend it if you have the money. Don't be tempted by the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus. They're just not worth it at those price points. If you want to go down, as I said, iPhone 13 or 13 Pro if you can find it. 13 Pro especially, I feel like it's going to be a very good buy for this coming year, so I'm definitely going to be doing a big review on that one. But for now, I think I'm pretty much done here. Hope you enjoyed. Again, sorry for the lack of videos lately. I feel like I've been saying this every video that I've made in the last couple months. It's just things keep coming up. I lost my voice due to laryngitis, and I'm still kind of recovering. I've had to do like every line here twice because my voice keeps giving out. At least it sounds not like I'm dying anymore. There's that. But if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and maybe consider subscribing for more content just like this if you haven't already. You can follow me on my socials if you'd like to. And yeah, without further ado, thank you so much for watching. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.